Just declare it to the Lord. I need you to know that Jehovah is on your side and He's before you. He's beside you. He's behind you. There is no reason to fear because God is in control. That's right. Sing trust. Sing trust me. Let's declare it now. For I am that I am. He says I have all power. So don't you doubt, 'cause I will deliver. Deliver. If you will only. Let's prepare for prayer. Let's
All right, good night, everyone, and welcome to our special presentation tonight. What's going on with my body? Now, let me go ahead and record this because persons are going to ask, where is the recording? Lovely. So we have the recording running and we are getting ready as we prepare for Dr. Dionne's arrival into tonight's presentation. But before we do this, let us start it off with a word of prayer. So bow your heads with me. Dear Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We want to thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be here tonight. We want to thank you, Lord, for your help message. We want to thank you, Lord, for all that have been said over the past weeks. And we want to thank you that we have the opportunity for another presentation here tonight. As we get ready, Lord, to go into this session, we just ask, Lord, that you may keep everything in line. And we ask that you may hold the internet, hold the connection, so that all the messages and the information that you need will be passed in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So welcome, one and all. It is definitely a pleasure to have all of you on here tonight. And tonight we have a special feature. We have Dr. Dionne all the way from Trinidad and Tobago. She is joining us here tonight. And it's going to be a powerful session. So I'm not going to do too much talking. I'm just going to set the tone and then we're going to move from here. Of course, disclaimer, we must state this. This webinar is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your routine. And if this is the first time you are joining us, this is Sunday Night Health. We're from the Evesham Sda Church Health Ministries Department, and we come on every Sunday night. We look at different topics. In the past, we have looked at multiple things: diabetes, hypertension, herbs, and all of these. And we are here spreading the health message through the Zoom platform. Now, we teach from 4 sources: the Bible, inspired writings, good science, and experience. And this is one of our key texts. It says, "And the Lord said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee." Tonight, I am your host, Coach Jason, and it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Dionne. Now, let me give you a little background about Dr. Dionne. So Dr. Dionne did her medical training in the Spice Island of Grenada and at the St. George's University. She went on to do some of her internship in the United Kingdom, and now she has been practicing in Trinidad and Tobago for quite some time, from the government sector to right now where she is in the private sector. And she spends a lot of her time right now sharing and giving back to the community through knowledge. There's only so much she can do, so much clients she can see at her office. So now she wants to reach a wider scope and make a bigger impact. And that is why she is lending us her precious time to come and share some powerful information with you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over now to Dr. Dionne. Dr. Dionne, good night and welcome to the presentation. Let me hand you over the host one time because I know you will need to share your screen. And in the meantime, Dr. Dionne is coming on. I need to put your round of applause in the chat. So give me a clappy hands and also drop where you guys are signing from so we can give you a shout out. Dr. Dionne, all yours.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Pleasure to be here again. We had a really good turnout last time, and we just really scraped the surface of general women's health. I think we just touched on a few little topics, and we really didn't have time to answer questions. So we want to have that opportunity to answer questions. But I kind of feel like led to just divert the conversation a little bit to digestion and just gut health and diet, because I feel like so many female issues, stem from that. And I think if we have a better grasp, a better concept of, where do we start and what is possibly the cause, because I'm a believer that, diet causes maybe 75%. It could be more, but I like to be conservative. So maybe 75% of what we're seeing now and treating now could have probably been prevented by a change in diet. And I feel like the concept of diet is such we throw it around a lot, and everybody wants to think they have the answer. And it's my hope that when I'm finished, you'll realize that nobody has the answer, because I think it's more of an approach that you look at when it comes to diet. So let me just share my screen. Now, let me see, I couldn't figure out how to get this into PowerPoint. So excuse the layout there, because I know you can still see everything. But it's not about the anatomy, because I feel like you can learn anatomy anyway. You could just Google all these things that I'm about to say, but it's a forward to the discussion that I want to have, right? So I'm just showing you this basic diagram of the lining of the gut, the mucous membranes. You can see up here is where that white space is where the food would be coming through, or whatever you take into your body. We have this lining here with the cells, and then whatever could pass is going to pass through. And we see we have the muscular layer that's going to control the gut. And then we're going to have the blood layer where all the things that come through the gut is going to go into the bloodstream. Now, this is what a healthy gut looks like, and this is what a leaky gut looks like. And that's a big term that I'm hearing a lot of people talk about. And I think they don't understand the concept of what leaky gut is. So I want to clarify that a little bit. Now, people love to think that mucus is bad. And mucus is not bad. Mucus serves a function. It serves a very important vital function, a protective function, a transportation function in our entire bodies. Or most of our mucous membranes have a nice thick layer of mucus on it. And that's why the mucous membranes, of course. And that mucus serves a purpose. And I'll be talking specifically here in the gut. And this blue layer that you're seeing here is the mucus layer. And you'd see that that mucus layer actually forms a barrier that acts as a filter. So it stops all these little particles that are in the gut itself from directly affecting these cells, which are responsible for transporting nutrients. Okay? Nutrients from the gut into the bloodstream. We see below here, we have our immune system. And the immune system is there in case anything tries to get through. It's going to kill the bacteria, kill the virus, kill whatever it might be, and then protect us. And all the other things that our body doesn't want is going to go straight through. When you have a leaky gut, this is what happens. You have the cells being damaged. And when these cells get damaged, what happens? There's nothing screening and filtering bacteria, viruses, chemicals, toxins, whatever, from passing through into here. But remember what was in this area here? It was the immune system. So a leaky gut, what it does, it super activates your immune system. Why would that happen? Because the immune system gets activated anytime we come across something that we don't recognize. So there are a lot of particles that are going to be up here that on a normal circumstance, they would not have been able to get through this mucus layer. They would have gotten trapped in the mucus. And even if they didn't get trapped in the mucus and it made its way here, these cells would not have transported it across. All right? However, if these cells are damaged, there's no mucus filter, all these particles can now get across. And then our immune system is like, raise the alarm. What's happening here? I don't recognize any of these things. Launches a big attack and therefore activates the immune system to start attacking things. So a lot of people who have any sort of chronic inflammatory process, a large number of them, the inflammation starts in the gut. So I love to have this discussion with people when they come and they suddenly have a story of maybe, Doc, I was fine 1 minute and I had an episode of diarrhea or I got gastro, and then all of a sudden I started to have these problems. All of a sudden I started to have joint pains. All of a sudden my legs started to swell or my hands started to swell. You know, that type of story. So they were good and then all of a sudden they were inflamed. And because the inflammation didn't go away, they started to become chronically inflamed. And then chronic inflammation, of course, leads to long-term issues. So you start to break down your tissues, you start to break down your joints, you start to break down, all the nutrients that you're supposed to be using to help rebuild the body. It gets broken down and being used just to sort of maintain this battle. What a lot of us forget, our immune system requires a lot of energy. Think about when you were really sick, any episode where you were really, really sick. Think of somebody who's had surgery. Think of somebody who's been in a major trauma. They get very, very tired. Why are they tired? Because the immune system is taking a lot of energy to fight that battle. So a lot of people with chronic fatigue, one of the questions I ask them, what's going on with your gut health? Because sometimes fatigue is not just fatigue. Sometimes fatigue is your immune system using up all the resources. And I think that's important to highlight. And remember, we're still talking in the context of female changes that are happening, okay? We're still talking under the context of, remember what I spoke about last time, where estrogen plays such a big role in our gut. We're talking about what I mentioned last time about the estrobiome, which is the bacteria that recycles estrogen. So if you have this leaky gut here, and you have toxins and mycotoxins and estrogen that was meant to be excreted, and you have this leaky gut, guess what? All of that is leaking right back into your bloodstream and giving your liver twice the amount of work, because now it has to remove it again, put it back into the guts, and then guess where it's going to end up again? So your liver becomes overworked because it's trying to remove the same set of particles day in, day out. I think that's really, really important for us to remember. I love this slide because this slide shows one concept that I want to get. This green layer here is mucus. This here, because this is an electron microscope, so that's why the color is a bit weird. This here shows the immune cells and our blood cells and stuff on the other side of this. And guess what this is? This is all the bacteria living in the bowel. They've done the studies and they've postulated, and I don't know how they came up with it, but when you research it, they've supposed that we have more foreign DNA in our bodies than we have our own internal DNA. Like if you weigh the DNA out, yours DNA and their DNA, you have more foreign DNA. And why is that? It's because of this. If you took all that out, so all the bacteria and that mucus out of the gut of anybody, and you weighed it, it will weigh as much as your brain. So anywhere from 5 to 8 pounds. So you have 5 to 8 pounds of bacteria, mucus in your gut doing what it wants to do. Okay? So when we talk about the terrain and when we talk about the gut terrain, this is what we're talking about. Because it's not just you, you are an ecosystem. And you have to be in control of that ecosystem because if you're not, it's going to be like a garden that you're not tending and it's going to just be rampant. So anybody's going to do what they want to do. They're going to overgrow, they're going to up, down, left, right, because you're not taking control of the terrain. Okay. I think this concept is really important for us to understand because at any one point in time, we love to think it's just one thing causing the problem. And the reality is, it's not just one thing causing the problem. All right. One other thing that I want to talk about is this. Let me see if I can get. I love asking people this question. Is health equal to fitness or not? What do we think? Just put it in the chat. What do you think? Is health equal to fitness? Anybody? Yes? No? What do you think, Coach Jason? Jump on. Let's have a little chat.
All right. So what you're saying is if you are if you are fit, does that also mean that you're healthy? That's what you're asking?
Correct. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. All right. All right. I would have to say no.
Why not?
So, right, come to the top of mind, come bodybuilders, professional bodybuilders. Now, professional bodybuilders are super fit. However, to get to that level, they have to use performance enhancement drugs, which damages the liver, swells the heart. So it does not mean that because you are fit, you could run 100 meters, you could run for 45 minutes, that you are necessarily healthy. Because if you look at their body and cells under the microscope, especially when you look at the arterial plaque, it doesn't reflect that one of a healthy person.
So the answer to the question really is, what are our markers of health? Right? Because if I use body weights, am I using waist measurements? Am I using BMI? What are the markers that we're using for health? Right? And when we look at the markers for health and we look at the markers for fitness, I know quite a few people who maybe can't run up 2 flights of stairs, but by Western medicine health standards, they're pretty healthy. And I know, look at sumo wrestlers. They can do some fantastic stuff, right? But you look at them and you'll be like, I'm not sure I would call that healthy. Maybe not, you know? So in the scope of that, we have to kind of get rid of this concept of health and fitness being one and the same. And we have to understand that the goals I have for my health may not be my fitness goals. Do you agree with that? Yeah, so sometimes we have to have two different lists that we mix and match that we're working towards when it comes to health and fitness, right? They may overlap at times, but they're not always, the same thing. So when we talk about health and fitness, we must talk about diet. I think I have a slide here on diet. Let me just see if I find it. Because I think this is where a lot of people get caught up. Okay, maybe not. Lots of hormonal stuff. Maybe one day we could do this presentation because I'm seeing a lot of hormonal stuff in that. Or if somebody asks a question, we could always pull it up. Right. Calories in, calories out. People love to have that conversation. We all know the food groups. There are all these diets right now. Low calorie, keto, low carb. And I'm sure a lot of people ask you, Coach Station, what should I eat? What do we tell them? What should I eat? What is healthy? What is good? So the analogy I love to use, and you can jump in at any point in time if you feel like this needs clarification, right? I like to think about our digestion like an oven. So we have an oven. This is the equipment. And what do we first have to do with the oven before we do anything else? And think about those old school dirt ovens. That's probably the best analogy. We have one of those old school dirt ovens, right? The baker wants to bake something today. He wakes up early in the morning, and what's the first thing they're going to do? If they touch the oven, what's going on with that oven? The oven is cooled. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take a little broom, sweep it, clean it out, and then they're going to have to put something in the oven to create the heat. Yeah? So if I'm creating heat in the oven, I can use different things to generate different kinds of heat. So if I have an oven running on paper and I have an oven running on coals, how am I going to generate the same amount of heat? No, right? Because the flames that I'm going to get, generally, the heat I'm going to generate is going to be very, very different. Now, we may start a fire with paper, but then what do? We will always put wood so that we have large flames. So we'll have the kindling, like they call it, generate a fire. The fire starts to rage and we put wood. The fire is raging. And then the temperature of the oven goes up dramatically, very, very quickly, because we have all these flames. And then what happens after that? They wait until the flames die down and they turn to coals. And when we reach that point of coals, that's when we get steady, even temperature. Now, we were just saying, okay, paper will give me one sort of heat. Coals may give me one sort of heat. Gasoline could give me one sort of heat. What do you think the fuel represents? If we're thinking about our digestive system, what does the fuel actually represent? So the fuel will represent the food that we put in. What we bake is the output. So I could be baking bread, but you could be making cake. Somebody else could be making pastries. Are we going to bake all of them at the same temperature? No, we're not, right? So let's say you have the oven, you lit the fire is raging. What are you going to put first? You're baking bread, cake, and pastries. What are you going to put in the oven first? You're going to put your bread because bread bakes at a higher temperature. And you're going to wait until that raging fire settles down. And when that fire settles down and you have a nice, even low temperature, then you're going to put in your cake. And when you finish that and you want a lower temperature, you're going to put in whatever you want for that lower temperature. So what's our output? So what we're baking is the output. So what would represent the output for us? So Coach Jason, your output might be you lifting 100-pound weights, you doing construction, you working hard, right? My output might be being pregnant, having a baby. My output might be sitting at a desk job. My output might be working on the road 24/7. My output is going to be different at different phases in life. So all of us have different outputs. So we have to understand how to regulate our temperature for the output that we're looking to have. Does that make sense? Good. Within that, right, you must have like a pilot light. So you must always have a baseline fire that's always going, that's going to help you light the big fire, so to speak. Because you can have all the fuel there, it needs to be on. And that pilot light, as I like to call it, is like your basic metabolic rate. It could be your state of wellness at the point in time, right? So somebody who is sick or somebody who's not well, their pilot light not on. And if their pilot light not on, they can't build a fire, right? If we think of the analogy as well, you have a fire, your fire is raging too high. What would happen if your fire is too high? You're going to burn everything. Burn it to a crisp. So you get no output, right? Because your fire is raging too high. What would that look like in our system? It's going to be things like acid reflux, burning, heat, that type of restlessness because the fire is burning too high. What would be the outcome if your fire is too low? You're going to have low stomach acid, so poor digestion, your fat's not going to go down, your proteins can't be broken down, you're going to have bloating, slow digestion, constipation, fatigue, because you're not getting nutrients. That's like if I try to bake the bread in an oven that's cold. So before I even light my fire, I put the bread in the oven. What happens to the bread? Nothing, because there's no fire to actually convert the bread, well, the dough into bread, right? Because there's no fire to bake the actual bread. So when the fire is too low, when we have those symptoms, like I was saying, the fatigue, the low appetite, bloating, indigestion, it means that digestive fire is out. So now we have to backtrack and we have to figure out, why is my fire out? Why is it not the level to actually process my food and give me the outcome that I'm looking for? All these ovens also have airflow, right? Because we need oxygen for these fires to light. So you must have a chimney, a hole, or something to do that, right? What happens if we don't clean the oven and the airflow gets blocked? Now we're going to have a whole different set of symptoms, right? Now you're going to get the constipation, things can't go in, you have vomiting because the channel is blocked. So there's no flow of what you put in and what you poop out, okay? Because that's how it comes out, all right? So each output that we have, and again, this is different for each individual, depends on the temperature that we have. Now, for some of us, it's easy to adjust the temperature. And for some of us, it's not easy to adjust the temperature. So then what should we do? We adjust the fuel. So if I'm running cold, guess what? I'm not going to try to bake bread. If I'm running hot, I'm not going to try to bake cake. Right? So think about meat sweats. You get meat sweats from eating fruit. What's meat sweats? You all know what meat sweats are, right? You know when people eat a lot of meat and they literally start sweating?
I don't think they know what that is, Dr. Dionne. Tell me
Right.
what
So
it is.
literally what it is people, when they start to eat, like they'll eat a steak or a big piece of meat, and the person literally starts sweating, like pouring sweat and feel restless. That's meat sweats. There's a reason you get meat sweats, because meat requires a high temperature for the body to break it down. So when you require high temperature and that furnace goes up and the fire goes up to break it down, literally you pour this warmth up and they start sweating, okay? So you raise the temperature internally and you start to sweat. So my question is, can you get meat sweats when you eat fruit? That never happens. Can you get meat sweats eating, like soup? No, you wouldn't. And the reason is because those things don't require a high temperature for your body to break it down and eat it. So somebody with a low temperature, right? They shouldn't be eating high temperature foods. And somebody with a high temperature, higher metabolism, shouldn't really be eating cooling, low temperature foods. That's where the mismatch happens. So that's why they'll eat certain things and feel, oh, this is healthy, but it doesn't make me feel good. Because they're not understanding how their digestion works and what will work with them. So the minute I'm building a diet for anybody, right, I ask those questions. When you eat soup, how do you feel? When you eat meat, how do you feel? When you eat fruits and salads, how do you feel? body temperature is 37 degrees, okay? I make an ice cold smoothie. I wake up in the morning, I blend it, and I take an ice cold smoothie and put it into a cold oven. What's going to happen? Absolutely
Okay,
nothing,
cool.
right? Why? Because the oven is cold. You've put more cold on, right? So now you're real cool. And then you're going to eat lunch and you eat a normal lunch in an oven that was never switched on. And then you
Mm.
wonder why you're bloated, why you're constipated, why your food right in your chest, because you never switched your oven on. And you dumped something that was not productive to turning that oven on to process food. Now, somebody who has a higher temperature, they may be able to handle a cold smoothie because their oven working real good. And they could drink that smoothie and they could switch it on. And that smoothie is actually cooling to them because it helps turn down their digestive fire to a normal level. Yeah. So I tell people a good way to know what to eat is when you eat the food, you ask yourself, how do I feel? How are you supposed to feel when you eat? Are you supposed to be raging fire? Are you supposed to be cool and stagnant and right in the chest? Or are you supposed to feel a nice warmth being generated, a nice, steady, consistent warmth? So if somebody's eating meals and they're falling asleep and they're tired and they're sluggish after they eat, what is it that telling me? That's telling me whatever you ate was in a cold oven and it didn't process. Yeah? And if they ate and 2 minutes after they're hungry or they sweat and then I know you did either didn't eat enough or what you ate was too heated for you. Yeah? If you eat and it's the right meal for you, you don't feel tired, you don't feel hot and sweaty, you feel a nice warmth that you could continue your activities as normal. Yeah? But you know that your food is moving through your system. Now, some people have cracks. And what it means when they have cracks in the oven, it means that a lot of the temperature is leaking out. Okay? So if the temperature is leaking out because structurally your oven not good, yeah, then you'll find that no matter what they do, they have problems because they leak heat. Sometimes it traps, sometimes it leaks. So the idea of how to eat becomes something that changes depending on that structural integrity. So the first thing they have to work on is their gut health and sealing up the cracks in their digestion. Because once they start to seal that up, now they could retain, now they could light their oven, now they could generate the heat that will then give them the outcome that they're looking for, right? When your oven is working well, all the nutrients that you take in, it gets processed cleanly with very little metabolic waste, and that's when you get good health. A lot of people, because their oven's not working well, they produce a lot of metabolic waste with whatever they eat. So they may be eating healthy things, but because they're not processing it, there's a lot of waste there, waste that cannot move, waste that cannot come out, and that creates more problems. Yeah. And so now, not only do they don't have enough nutrients, they also have metabolic waste to get rid of. So now they're in a state of not being as healthy as they should be, even though the diet fits what we call a healthy diet, because now the metabolic waste is too much for them to handle, right? So I always tell people, think about these things when you are looking at formulating a diet and looking at digestion, because as women, everybody wants to say, okay, right, this is the formula that I should have. And the fact of the matter is, for women, because we have 3, 4 phases of our cycle, my oven temperature is going to change 3, 4 times a month. So there's certain points in my cycle where I can tolerate certain things very, very easily. Most women will tell you once they're just before their period, what happens? Their appetite goes crazy. They start eating and snacking. Why? Because they're generating that heat. The oven is heating up in preparation for what is going to happen, right? Some people also notice it with ovulation as well, because their body needs the energy, sends up the temperature, and they need to eat more. But then there are times in the cycle, like when the period just starts, where, listen, all the woman wants to do is lying in her bed with a cup of tea. She doesn't want any food. She actually fasting without even realizing she fasted because her oven is cold. She's leaking blood, right? The blood is what's bringing all this stuff. So because that blood is leaking out, her oven is cold, and she has to change how she's eating for that point in her cycle. And then there are points in a cycle where she's going to be just good. So ovulation is like that because you've warmed, your estrogen is high, you're feeling good, you want to socialize. So you want calories. So your body again is going to say, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Right after your period, a lot of women crave iron because you just lost some iron. So guess what? The temperature goes back up a little bit again, and they'll find they can eat all the meat they want in that phase, not have a problem. But at other points in their cycle, if they eat meat, they find it's too heavy or it makes them feel sick. Okay. So as women, there's no one diet. And that's why I want to emphasize in all of this that when we're building something, everybody's different. So if I'm building a diet for somebody who has leaky guts, who has fibroids and pelvic stagnancy, I am not going to give that person the same diet as a pregnant woman or as a 30-year-old woman who is fit, right? And her digestive system is in good working order. Because I have to look at the point, where is that person's oven running? Are they running high? Are they running low? Are they running perfectly well? And that's how we build the diet from there, using foods that are going to balance their oven and their temperature, using fuel that their body can actually handle, understanding the concept that you can't throw a whole lot in a cold oven. You have to warm the oven up first. You have to bring the temperature up a little bit first before you put your proper fuel in to raise the temperature to get a good output. Okay? And that concept is what I want people to understand. That if you would just pay attention to how you feel when you eat certain things, it gives you so much more insight as to how do I build my diet? Because my diet, I don't think anybody here would think that you and I should be eating the same diets, right? Now we both know what's healthy, we both know how to calculate calories and protein and stuff, but we both agree our outputs are different, and therefore our diets need to be different. Yeah. So people kind of, oh, okay, I need to go keto, I need to cut down this, I need to do this, I need to eat more raw foods. I will tell you personally, there's definitely points in life and in my cycle where I avoid fruits. Literally, fruits make me feel bloated. I don't digest them. I get more gassy. I have issues when I eat it. And there are other times where I'm perfectly fine eating fruits. And I've seen that for myself. So there are times where I'm all just cooked vegetables. I wouldn't touch a salad. I wouldn't touch anything raw. Raw and me were enemies. Yeah. And then after I came out of that phase and my digestion was much better, I was able to do that again. But I still have to monitor because there are times where I'd eat it and I'd feel that stagnancy and bloating again and be like, ooh, what I ate was too cooling. It slowed everything down. So now I have to backtrack and try to use things to warm it up. And it's easy to warm up your foods. What we do, we add spices. So you add clove and cinnamon and nutmeg, all these warming spices to your food because that generates more warmth. Ginger is lovely for generating heat. So you feel like you're bloated, you feel like you have some ginger tea, have some spice tea, have something that's going to bring some warmth and then eat. So you've just started that fire going before you throw the fuel in, before you try to get the outcome that you want to get. That's what I want to emphasize today. So now we could, unless you want to have something else to say about digestion or any questions on that, let's go to question and answer.
All right, lovely, lovely. So, guys, do me a favor, let's just keep it orderly. You could either drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and then we will unmute you. all right, to ask the questions. So, Dr. Dionne, while they do that, I think this would be a good one to jump on, right? Because I think you mentioned a lot about it, so I think it'll be a good place to start. Um, let me just pull this slide up here, and then I'm gonna hand it back over to you. I wanted to explain
Sure.
this because a lot of ladies would love this explanation. So we talk about the phases for the woman, right? From the menstruation phase, the ovulation phase, back to menstruation. Now, explain for us, first of all, the average timeline from the menstruation to the ovulation, then from ovulation to back to menstruation, what hormones peak, what emotions follow, and especially, and what I'm trying to get at to is that a lot of ladies that I see, some of them have longer bleeding, shorter bleeding, ridiculously long bleeding. And I think if we understand what triggers the bleeding, what triggers what and what, then we'll be able to help us to understand how we can address those causes. So let me just hand it back over to you. Do you want me to leave this on the screen or?
No, you can leave the slide up. That's fine.
Okay, sweet.
So one of the things that you say that's quite important is that this slide was created by looking at the averages of multiple women of mostly Caucasian.
Mostly Caucasian, I said?
Mostly Caucasian. Let me just slip that in.
Okay.
Mostly Caucasian, because
I
most of
think
these
I
studies
heard
are
that,
not
but go
done.
ahead.
Yeah, mostly Caucasian. To map out the cycle that we have. Now, the cycle in general holds for every woman, right? Don't get me wrong. But the duration and how it happens varies woman to woman. So I always start everybody with discussion. Don't expect the exact thing to happen for everybody the exact same way. Okay? The cycle happens, but the duration of each cycle could be different. Yeah. I remember having a patient, for instance, who was trying to get pregnant. So she was using the 14-day cycle, because we ovulate at day 14. And, it turns out that she shifted it 5 days before. So she started having intercourse 5 days before the 14 days rather than when they started the 14 days. And that's how she got pregnant. She was ovulating way 5 days before 14 days. So when she was trying to get pregnant on that 14-day mark, she had already ovulated, which is why she was never getting pregnant. Okay? The cycle can vary anywhere from, we say, about 26 to 28 days, all the way up to 32 days, and that's all normal. It's all normal. Now, we start the cycle when bleeding actually starts. And this is part of the reason why the timing can be different, okay? And I'll use myself as an example. I remember being an intern. I remember having periods. And of course, this was a very stressful time. That's why I highlighted the point that I was an intern at that point. And I would have menstrual bleeding up to 8 days, 9 days at times. Right now, I'm about 3 days, maybe 3.5 days. Does that mean my cycle changed? Does that mean the duration of my cycle changed? Yeah. Because if we count ovulation as being 14 days from bleeding, and before I bled for 9 days, and now I'm bleeding for 3 days, when am I ovulating? Right? So that's why I'm just trying to emphasize that this cycle slightly changes for everybody. And because we're not trying to be scientists here, we're trying to help people fix their issues. I want everybody to analyze their own cycle from the perspective of what's supposed to happen and when should it happen. So the order remains. It's going to be menstrual phase, follicular phase, as it goes, ovulation, luteal. That stays the same for everybody, but the timing is going to be different for everybody. So day one is the first day where you have your period. So after you have your period and you bleed, what drives bleeding? So the bleeding is driven by the thickness of the lining. So if we have a picture of the uterus and we look on the inside, do you have a picture of the uterus?
I'll pull on up while you're talking.
Yeah. So if we, on the outside, we have the myometrium, which is the muscular layer, okay? Inside that muscular layer, we have some secretory cells, and those cells, called the endometrium, secrete the blood into the uterus itself. The thickness of that lining is directly related to estrogen levels. Okay, so are we found one?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah, perfect. Can you make it a little bigger?
Sure.
Perfect, nice. So we're seeing that rough layer on the inside. That rough layer on the inside is the secretory cells that changes the thickness of the lining. So when we do an ultrasound, some women will see 2 centimeters, like 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 2 centimeters. So you see all different sort of measurements for that lining and where that lining is. So that lining is directly related to estrogen levels. So any woman that has estrogen dominance, okay,
Mhm.
and estrogen dominance could be a ratio thing. It could be how high the estrogen goes in terms of the absolute value. All those things are going to affect how thick that lining gets. And how thick that lining gets is going to determine how heavy your period is. Okay, so if you have a thicker lining, you're going to have a heavier period. So one of my secret weapons, but now it's not a secret anymore because I keep telling earlier, is I would do a detox. I would literally give women, and I don't know if Coach Jason, we could mention the drink to shrink here because that's one of the ones that I
Sure,
use.
sure, sure. Go for it. Go for it.
And
Blue
it
tea,
just makes you
everything.
poop. So any kind of detox that makes you poop, I would give women a detox 3 to 5 days before their period. Why am I doing that? To clear excess estrogen. Because guess what? If I clear the excess estrogen before, while that lining is building up, guess what? The lining does not build up abnormally. Because remember, we spoke about the estrobiome. We spoke about the fact that estrogen gets recycled in the gut and it's going to recycle more pre having a period. Why? Premenstrual, because everybody gets constipation premenstrual. Ask the woman, right? We know that. So that premenstrual constipation means you're reabsorbing and recycling a ton of estrogen. So a short detox to flush that out means the lining doesn't get so thick. And if the lining doesn't get so thick, I don't have heavy bleeding. One of my secrets. I ain't gatekeeping anymore. So take that how you may, use it how you may. One of the things as well is that imagine somebody who is in a chronic state of being not detoxed, they're not pooping, they have estrogen dominance, and the estrogen is so high that lining keeps building up. And even though they're bleeding, the estrogen builds that layer as fast as it's being shed. What's going to happen? They continue bleeding. Because if you go back, if you run back to the cycle, I'll give you some work to do, Coach Jason. Put back up the picture with the cycle.
No worries. I'm here with you. Don't worry. Let me get it up for you. Run back to that cycle. All right.
So if we go
Share.
back to the picture of the cycle, you will see that certain things have to happen for the period to stop and for us to enter into the next phase. Okay? Watch that estrogen, right? Now remember, this is relative. So if you put your cursor just where you see menstrual phase, right? So take it up a little bit. So if we draw a line straight across, let's suppose somebody's estrogen level was running at that high level all the time, right? So going straight above, so instead of it being below where it peaks above ovulation, let's suppose somebody
Uh-huh.
had an estrogen level that was above that line in menstrual phase going straight across.
Above the line
Yeah,
or below?
keep
Like
going,
going
no
straight?
peak, right,
Okay.
perfect. How is the body going to tell we've entered a second phase if we always high?
Right, right, right.
Yeah. So you see where, because it's not just absolute values. It's not like the body says, if I have 23 micrograms of estrogen, I'm just using random figures, guys, right? So don't
Mhm.
come from with that. But let's suppose it's 23 micrograms is the peak. My body isn't going to say only when I get to 23, that's the peak to start ovulation. It's a relative peak. So it has to go from wherever you are above a certain amount from the baseline to enter the next phase of ovulation. But if you're
Right.
estrogen dominant and you're always high, how does your body get the signal we out of the menstrual phase, we enter ovulation? And the reason I'm skipping follicular phase is because follicular phase isn't as impacted by estrogen, right? You understand? So that's the only reason I'm not mentioning. That's why I'm saying menstrual and ovulation, because we're talking about what is triggering what. So estrogen is determining how much bleeding I'm going to have. And then the next thing it's going to do is determine the peak and ovulation. But if I'm always high, when is the signal going to come that ovulation should start now? So when we have women with estrogen dominance, and again, what are the estrogen dominance? I mean, PMOS, which was formerly known as PCOS. That's one of the biggest conditions where we see that, right? But we know also fat cells produce estrogen, right? So somebody who's just overweight with a little PCOS, they could be in estrogen dominance where their body's not triggering that ovulation phase. So they're in a constant menstrual phase. Yeah.
So the
So
body's
that's two
constantly just
possible.
depositing.
Yes, exactly. So two possible reasons right there where somebody could have themselves bleeding for weeks and can't explain it. Right? So let's go back again. Now I'm kind of not explaining the table as presented because I'm trying to get certain concepts across. So if you don't understand, just stop me and we could go back over it. But I kind of want to emphasize how we look at this table, how we look at this, pattern, the cycle, and what is it reflecting on in our bodies? Because it's all well and good to write this on a biology test and pass. It's not helpful when I'm bleeding for 2 weeks, is it? Right?
No.
So I'm trying to just build the layers on so we understand the concepts that's happening in the background. Okay. So I may not follow it exactly how it is there, but if the concept I'm explaining is difficult, just stop me, right? So that's estrogen. So estrogen is going to map that out for us. Okay. Remember, we talked about estrogen being very dominant in terms of giving us things like vitality, controlling emotions, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why when ovulation happens, we feel good, right? So that spike in estrogen has a lot to do with our mood, how we feel, how strong we are, and what we can do. That includes physical capabilities. We also spoke about the fact that estrogen plays a big role in gut health. High estrogen actually negatively impacts the gut. Okay. So again, we're talking about somebody with estrogen dominance, making a lot of estrogen. They're in a constant state of high estrogen. All these things are going to go off. That's going to be the woman that's snappy, irritable, moody with you. Can't stand anybody. This one annoying her, that one annoying her. She's not sleeping at night, her digestion in a mess, right? And she can't get pregnant. But not getting pregnant is the least of her concerns. But at that point in time, that's all estrogen mediated. Then we also have to consider that the estrogen can also modulate some of the other parts of the cycle. Okay, so let's go with let's look at progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone are the two big ones. The two other smaller graphs is LH and FSH. LH and FSH really is what is going to stimulate the ovary to make the egg, right? So LH and FSH peak with that estrogen so that the egg forms because the egg is literally only alive for like a day. This misconception of you have 200 days. That egg is only alive for 1 day. You have 24 hours to get pregnant. People sometimes look at this and think, and sometimes I wonder, why do we have so many people being born? Because it's such a divine, orchestrated, everything had to line up so well just to get pregnant. All right. Now, so FSH and LH will control that. And those are the two graphs you see there that peaking with estrogen, right? Estrogen is the biggest peak, and the other two peaks are controlling just the release of the egg. So, I mean, not much to talk about there because those hormones don't have so much of an impact in terms of how we feel and the dynamics of, the symptoms that we have. It does have to do with ovulation and releasing the egg. So in some cases, we will check the levels to make sure the levels are okay, to know if the person can ovulate, right? Those levels will go down as age and as the number of eggs you have diminish, right? So once you don't have eggs, you're into menopause, all those things flatline. So the next biggest hormone that we have is progesterone. So progesterone is the pink graph that you see there. So after ovulation, so let's just backtrack a little bit. We have menstruation, which is day 1. Your bleeding cycle lasts anywhere from 3 days to maybe 7 days. I used to preach that 8 days was normal, but I have changed my tune. I think we should be down to 3 days or 4 days maximum. When you look at any mammal, none of them have menstrual cycles. Okay? You look at dogs, whales, everybody, they have a spotting episode, and that's the end of their menstrual phase. So why are we bleeding something as precious as iron for 7 days? That's not normal. And so I've changed that concept in my head because I used to tell everybody, oh yeah, 7 days bleeding is normal. I know now that that's not normal. You know where they see, this is an interesting fact. You know where they see mammals bleeding and having menstrual cycles? Mammals in the zoo. Mammals in captivity are the ones that bleed. Out in the wild, nothing. Even if we think about indigenous tribes, so you look at Gabon in Africa and the Eskimos and those people living in the bush, like real with nature, they will pop out a child and continue working in the field. Yeah? They don't have excessive bleeding because if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, you have time to tie up and pull and pad and do all these things? No. So our bodies didn't evolve for that. So everything our body does is about efficiency. So why would we shut down for 7 days a month? That makes no sense, right? Logically, it makes no sense. So why do we see it all the time? It's stress. I honestly think it's just like the mammals. We're now being brought up in a stressful society where women are finding their place. And for me, I always say it's because we're trying to be masculine in a masculine world when we're supposed to be feminine, right? So be feminine. And so anytime we're not in our elements and we're all stressed out and creating a lot of imbalance in the hormones, I think that is one of the causes. And that's why I highlighted my experience when I was an intern. It was bad. Things were rough. And I noticed that was the heaviest point in time. And now that I am so much better, detoxing, doing what I love, everything just righted itself. So I think that's a whole element, separate and apart from the physiology that we could talk about when it comes to heavy bleeding. Okay? Because our bodies there's no reason why we should waste 7 days of iron. Our body has about 5 or 6 different processes to recycle iron. We don't waste it. So why would we bleed that much for 7 days when we have all these processes to reabsorb and recycle the iron? It has to be something overriding the system. Something's overriding that default button, that backup that's going to kick in. It's not kicking in for whatever reason, right? That's just my 2 cents. So menstrual phase up to 7 days. Follicular phase is, of course, when that egg is developing, leading up to you have the egg in what we call a corpus luteum, and that's in the ovary itself, and it looks like a cyst. And actually, PCOS, the cyst that form, is really that corpus luteum that is actually rupturing, releasing that egg into the womb, and then remaining as a cyst to control. So yeah, it remains as a cyst in the ovary, and the egg goes through the fallopian tubes and into the uterus itself. So to actually get pregnant, that egg has to be fertilized in the fallopian tube. Okay? Eggs don't get fertilized in the uterus People think that, but it doesn't, because it literally is only alive for 24 hours. Okay? So the corpus luteum is a cyst that remains there after the egg is released, and it's supposed to disappear. But what happens in some people is because of the estrogen, that cyst remains. And instead of disappearing when there's no pregnancy, the cyst remains. And it generates more hormones, it generates more cysts, and then you have this cascade of having multiple cysts happening. Okay? So that egg comes down, it's not fertilized, the dead egg goes into the uterus, and all of that signals the uterus, okay, right, we didn't get pregnant, shed this lining, let's make a new one. And so that lining gets shed, and then you have your next phase of menstrual cycle again. Now, in that phase of post-ovulation to your next menstrual cycle, progesterone takes over. And progesterone is what's going to help the egg, if it was fertilized, stay fertilized. And progesterone is like your Zen hormone, right? I like to think about it like your Zen hormone. You're chill, you're relaxed, you're calm. It does all the healing things. It's a good one. Estrogen is the one that gives us that energy, that drive. It makes us raw. We need to keep going. But progesterone is your chill hormone, right? You just feel relaxed, you feel calm. All of that is what progesterone does. So that end phase is really preparing the body for the pregnancy and the resources, pulling the resources together to allow the implantation and the placenta to develop. Okay? And that's what you see on the end, where we call the luteal phase. Now, a lot of women have an imbalance between that estrogen and progesterone. And why would that imbalance happen? We just highlighted it. Because remember when you drew that line for me about with the estrogen dominance, right? And we said, what happens if a woman's estrogen, right? Look at what happens that triggers progesterone. Progesterone is triggered by ovulation. So if there's no ovulation, or if the estrogen doesn't start to dip, there's no rise in progesterone. And if progesterone is the Zen hormone, the one that calms things down and more responsible for healing and starting over a new cycle, and that never happens, what's going to happen? Burnout.
Estrogen dominance.
No, it's burnout, because that's the healing component to balance the estrogen activity, right? We all need to rest and be active, right? It's two sides of the coin. So if the estrogen is taking over constantly and not giving progesterone time to kick in, that's when we have burnout as women. So it is estrogen dominance, yes, but it's not giving progesterone its time to shine. Now, that's a really simplified way of explaining it, because again, is the concepts I want you guys to understand. So that if you understand, this is how I feel in my luteal phase, and I'm not feeling that way this month, what's going on with me? This is how I feel when I'm ovulating, and I don't feel that way. What's going on? You understand? So now we can ask those questions, because we understand how the hormones are going to impact our physical body. Yeah? You have to have that balance of estrogen and progesterone in the cycle for you to feel good, be healthy, and be normal. The cycle is the same for everybody. But let's say we had somebody with a 32-day cycle. And like my sister is one of those people. I think my sister has a 31-day cycle. And she's always had that cycle, right? Her length of her menstrual, ovulation is literally a very short phase. So that doesn't change by much. So the menstrual, the follicular, and the luteal phase, those timings are different. So I have about a 27-day cycle. So it means somewhere she has extra days in extra parts of her cycle, because she's a 31-day cycle. So maybe she has an extra day in her follicular phase. Maybe she has 2 extra days in her luteal phase. You understand? Because the menstrual phase changes for everybody. You can have somebody with a 5-day period, 3-day period. So menstrual phase could change for every individual. So then the follicular and luteal phases are the next 2 phases that will lengthen or shorten depending on the length of your entire cycle. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. And guys, don't forget to ask your questions, get the questions going. Now, Doc, just quickly, I want to touch on a couple of topics just to explain how they works. It might get the minds triggering. So we
Mm-hmm.
understand that estrogen is a builder, progesterone
Mm-hmm.
is a calmer. Now, in a case of fibroids, one of the things you always hear is to try and remove excess estrogen in a diet, one. And also, what are some sources of excess estrogen apart from the body not detoxifying the one that comes in? Like, what are some sources that could be causing the estrogen levels to remain as we have in this straight line here
Okay,
for
good
this period
question.
of time?
So when you look at a keloid under a microscope, a keloid actually looks like scar tissue. Sorry, I'm saying keloid, fibroid. A fibroid
Oh,
looks like a keloid. It looks like scar tissue when you look at it under a microscope. So when you look at a keloid, it's all swirls of collagen, and a fibroid looks very, very similar. Now, I think the question here really is a trigger. I don't think the trigger for fibroids is estrogen necessarily. To get a scar, there must be some sort of trauma. Yeah. And we think trauma can only be physical. So, like, I cut you with a knife, that's trauma, right? I hit you with a piece of steel, that's trauma. But remember, we could also have chemical trauma. We could have receptors being overstimulated, which is trauma. So I think the initial trauma, which could in most cases be toxins, chemicals, infections, are the initial trigger for the fibroids. And then estrogen feeds the fibroid,
okay.
right?
Mhm.
So we talk about once you have fibroids, get the estrogen down because fibroids depend on estrogen to grow rapidly. But I personally, and I'll add that disclaimer, I personally don't think the estrogen is the trigger. I think there's another trigger or something triggers it. And in most cases, I think it's infection, or like I said, need to detox some chemicals, whatever it might be. They've actually looked at studies now and they realize our uterus is not sterile. We have a whole microbiome in the uterus as well, too. And, so all these imbalances can cause issues where that trauma then creates the keloid, which is a small little scar tissue, which your body should be able to heal. But if you can't heal it, it starts to grow. And the estrogen, it's able to use estrogen to feed itself and grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So once you're already in that cycle of the fibroid growing, you don't have a choice. You have to slow down the estrogen dominance. And by slowing down the estrogen dominance, the fibroid starts to shrink. So you'd see us when we talk about fibroids, talking about the liver, the gut, and all these things to get the estrogen down. And again, in those women, more than likely, their estrogen levels are too high anyway. So we're bringing it down to baseline. So we're not saying that you need to drop your estrogen levels below what your normal is. Okay. And again, for each woman, estrogen range is different. There's no one size fits all. My estrogen level is completely different to anybody else's hair, right? As a female, because we all have our baseline estrogen level that we work with. Now, there are two things when we talk about the things that mimic estrogen, all right? So we have phytoestrogens, which we find in like soy, flax seeds to some extent. That's one way you get extra estrogen. BPA, they found also mimics estrogen. So when you have plastic bottles and you leave your plastic bottle out in the sun, now, to be fair now, that's less because a lot of people are aware. So you find a lot of the plastics they're doing are BPA free. But again, 10 years from now, we're going to find that what they're using now is doing the same thing. Just the same way they found out what the BPA is. So generally, plastics and stuff, we'll get the estrogen disruptors there. And there's also mycotoxins. So there's something called zearalenone, and you can look that up. Zearalenone is a mycotoxin from Fusidin fungus, if I remember correctly, or Fusarium, that's what it is, Fusarium. So, and that zearalenone looks identical, almost identical to estrogen. So you can have this molecule, and not surprisingly, this fungus grows on corn, wheat, barley, so mostly grains. And like I tell people, when we process these things and we cook them, we don't destroy mycotoxins. Now, we might kill the fungus, right? But remember, mycotoxins are chemicals. So the chemical usually remains unchanged. And that chemical, when we eat it, it literally acts as estrogen and can bind to estrogen receptors that will literally stimulate that estrogen receptor in a not irreversible, but let's say estrogen binds for half an hour. This molecule is going to bind for a day. It's going to be exponential in terms of how it stimulates the receptors. So when it binds, even though it's not irreversible, we kind of almost talk about it like irreversible because it takes so long for it to unbind. So it's almost as if it binds there for quite some time. So those would be things that I would look at. And this is where we have this idea of when you're treating fibroids, you take them off the wheat and the grains and all these things. And they feel better, but it's not really the wheat and it's not really the grains. It's really the mycotoxins. And the way I like to explain it is back in the day, they had a wheat field. They'll cut the wheat, it stays on the ground. The next day they pick it up. Then they carry it to wherever they store it in these grain harvesters, whatever. And then maybe the next day the baker is gonna, grind that up and make some bread with it on demand, right? Now we could go to that process in the space of an hour. Cut the wheat, harvest it, put it in a mill, grind it, package it. I mean, that's happening exponentially. So the whole process of what the wheat went through in those days leading up to that has disappeared. So there isn't even time for, again, the fungus to die or or leach out, whatever. We don't know. There was a way of doing it back then, and now that's not being done now. And so it's a lot of the times why people have gluten sensitivities because they spray the wheat with glyphosate and all these chemicals. And how does glyphosate work? Glyphosate works by killing destroying the mitochondria of pests. So have you ever sprayed a bug with some, I don't know what you guys have in St. Vincent, but like Bob spray, we call it Bob spray. So you spray with Bob
Yes,
spray,
we have that.
that beat up, beat up, and then it gets
Right.
paralyzed and it dies, right? So that's how it kills pests. And it does that by shutting down the mitochondria. And if you shut down the mitochondria, you have no energy, right? So you spray the fields and you saturate it with this glyphosate to kill all the pests. So then you harvest it and you grind it up. But guess what? You still have this glyphosate that's saturated in your crops. You didn't give it time to disperse or break down or settle. You just grind that up. So now what we have glyphosate powder. And then you use the glyphosate powder to make bread. And while the wheat might be immune because the wheat doesn't have mitochondria the same way we do in terms of plant versus animal. So the wheat might be resistant, but guess what? My mitochondria aren't resistant because my mitochondria is similar to animals. So a lot of people eat wheat and they feel tired, they feel drained, they feel sick. And it's because the glyphosate in that wheat is turning off your mitochondria slowly. So whereas in a little bug, that causes it to become paralyzed. In us, it causes us things like just fatigue, right?
Right.
So we have to also look at where the products are coming from. So it's not just a simple matter of saying cut out the wheat, cut out the corn, cut out the dairy. You still have to look at the source of it. So it's really, we're not anti-wheat, anti-corn, anti-barley, anti-grain. It's really the additional products being added that's causing the problem, right? So
All right. Doc, the question is coming in now, right?
Okay,
So
go
I'm
ahead.
going to stop my questioning and let me go to these questions. All right. So the first one is briefly, what are some foods to avoid when someone has fibroids? That's question number one. What are some foods to avoid when someone has fibroids?
Right. So top of the list would be chicken. Why chicken? Because chicken, how do you get a chicken plump and fat in 2 weeks? They pump it full of estrogen. Why? Because estrogen encourages fat deposition. You get your chicken nice and fat, you cook it, you don't destroy the estrogen. So chicken would be number one on my list in terms of things to avoid for fibroids. I would cut down on the grains for the same reason that I said. The other big reason is zearalenone, which is a mycotoxin that is commonly found in grains, and that mimics estrogen. So if you have estrogen dominance, you want to cut that down as well. Red meat, not so much because I'm anti-meat. And I think we need the red meat as women because we need that extra iron. So it's about a balance. But again, the same reason, meat, the estrogen levels, not being able to break down and digest meat properly. So I always say cut down on it a little bit. Soy products is a little bit iffy. So I tell people stay away from the soy products if they have fibroids. They found soy products to be helpful in perimenopause and menopause. But I think in the scope of really bad fibroids, better safe than sorry, I say cut it out. Yeah. BPA, we talked about the plastic bottles. That'll be the next big one I suggest you stop. So everything should be glass, stainless steel. Try to, go around your house and eliminate all the plastic that you can, because that's another big one. So those are the main things I would suggest to avoid. But I think it's more important what to include when it comes to fibroids than what to avoid, because it's all about gut health and recycling the estrogen. So if it's like a bucket. I'm pouring everything on the top and I have a little hole. I need to drain my bucket. So what can I do? I make my hole on the bottom bigger. So if I drain faster than it's piling up, I don't have to worry so much what's coming in because I can drain it fast enough. So I think it's really more important to focus on what you need to get moving and what you need to eat to flush the gut, get good gut health, and that's going to really help manage your estrogen and your fibroids.
Okay, sweet. Now, you mentioned detox. Come back to detox, right? Let me keep the questions coming. I would also add to that, increase your fiber because your fiber help to move
Correct. So
any
that's all gut
excess of
health.
time.
Definitely.
All right, so let me come back. Next question. Now, this question is asked in regards to the analogy you give with the oven of the fire. The fire, different things coming in. So let me just read the question as is. So when you don't produce no hormones, I guess they mean limited hormones because you always produce hormones, and there is no fire in you, what happens? How do you continue to survive and fulfill your husband's desires?
Right. So I think that has a bit of layers there. Now, remember in the human body, our body always has priorities, right? And survival is our biggest priority. Reproduction is our least priority. So anybody who's sick, the first thing that shuts down is reproduction. You don't want to be reproducing if you can't manage to take care of this baby, this child, right? So there's no point. So when women go through their phases where it starts with the oven being too cold, they can't digest, they can't have the output that they need. Yes, reproduction and stuff is going to shut down. The hormone levels, hormones, producing hormones is expensive. It's metabolically expensive, right? And that's why once women get stressed, even you see it with athletes, once they push their bodies too hard, what happens? You see that this nice little cycle we see here? That'll happen. The body shuts that down because just doing that, making those spikes, is an expensive process. The body's going to turn that off. Okay. And that creates the imbalance that I assume they're talking about in the question. So a lot of the times we don't look at fixing the question, fix the fire, fix your gut health, fix the food that you're eating, get your body operating and feeling safe. Because when your body feels safe and when you're getting the nutrition that you need, everything else is going to fall back into place. It's your body trying to conserve itself and being able to survive. We see this in people who, for instance, elderly patients, and they're eating, but they're losing weight, they're losing weight, they're losing weight. Why? Because muscle is the most metabolically active tissue. So if you're in starvation mode 24/7, right? Why would your body try to keep muscle? The first thing it'll get rid of is get rid of the muscle so we don't need so many calories. So the calories now match what we're taking in. Okay? So that's where it happens. So even if you're talking menopause in that regard, it's the same thing because there are women who go through menopause and they don't have any problems. And then there are women who go through menopause and they have real problems because menopause doesn't start on one day. Menopause is a build-up. So if you were poor nutritionally leading up to menopause, you're going to have real problems, right? But if you're in good health, good nutritional status, your hormones were good, you're going to have a nice plateau into menopause and you're not going to have any symptoms. So anybody's having those menopausal symptoms, I guarantee you you're having gut issues, you're having nutritional issues, and your oven fire is too cold. And that's why you're not generating that vitality, that warmth, that feeling that you were feeling when you were younger, and all the hormones were working well. And nutritionally, you're in a much better state.
All right, lovely. So let's move to the next question. Guys, keep the questions coming, right? We're firing full throttle now. All right, this doc, this is about 3 questions in one. So yeah, if you want me to repeat them, you want me to do them one
Yeah.
by one, or you want me to do them the whole slide as you read it there?
Read the whole slide first.
Let's read the whole thing. What would help for the clash between estrogen and progesterone? Number 2 now, low ferritin due to iron deficiency because of heavy bleeding. What would be the cause of heavy bleeding? I think you discussed that. And what would be the solution to have a 3-day period? That's a handful there for you. I'll keep you busy tonight.
No, that easy. All right, let's start with that one. So the first question was, oh, sorry, remember the first part of the question?
No
I wrote down the
problem.
last bit.
What would help for the clash between estrogen
good.
and progesterone?
The answer to that is there is no clash. It's a transition. So if you put back up the slide, remember estrogen peaks and
Sure.
drops. And when estrogen drops, progesterone takes over. Right? Right, perfect. So when estrogen drops, progesterone takes over. So it's not a clash, it's a transition. So what we talk about is that this transition is not happening because the estrogen is not dropping, it's constantly high. So progesterone never gets that signal to increase. So the answer there is we treat the estrogen dominance, we get the estrogen to drop, and therefore progesterone will have its moment to shine. So that's the answer to the first part of that question. We talked about several ways we could get estrogen to drop. We talk about gut health, the estrobiome. We talk about fiber. We talk about liver because the liver metabolizes all the estrogen. Liver health is absolutely key if you want to manage your estrogen levels, right? So that is how we would get the estrogen to drop, and automatically the progesterone is going to go up. Now, some women, if you're really into menopause, really poor health, we may have to supplement progesterone, right? But that's not the case with most people. Most people, if they get the estrogen to dip, they're going to move on to get progesterone. Good. Ferritin. That's a really good question because it's a common one that we see. Ferritin is actually the better indicator of iron deficiency than looking at your blood count because your body can pull it from reserves. The other important thing to note about ferritin is also a marker of inflammation. When you are inflamed chronically, your ferritin drops, and it has nothing to do with iron deficiency. Yeah. So people who are chronically inflamed and they have low ferritin, I always say, wait, we need to do some additional testing. Okay. Now, if we show that the low ferritin is related to iron deficiency and you're not getting it up, is one of two things. One, you're bleeding more than you could produce. And two, it means that you're probably not absorbing it the way you're supposed to absorb. What's the best way to get the iron in? We take supplements, so you eat the food properly. And for most women, it's because of what I said earlier. They're running cold ovens. And when I say we're running cold ovens, what I mean is that the digestion is so slow, they're not breaking down the protein, they're not absorbing well, their stomach acid is low, so they're not actually absorbing the iron. Okay, if you don't absorb the iron, your ferritin will stay low. So I tell people use digestive enzymes, look at the different foods that have high iron, try a few different ones. So you can range anything from meat, spinach, black sesame seeds, molasses, all these different things, but everybody's going to respond to it differently. So for me, there are days in my cycle where I could eat a big piece of beef. But then there are days in my cycle where I don't have meat at all. I just cannot digest it well. So on a day where I notice the digesting meat is an issue, I'm going to do spinach. I'm going to do black sesame seeds. I'm going to do something else that has a lot of iron. Lentils have a decent amount of iron as well too. So I'm going to do something like that, right? And then use my, like I said, make sure my stomach acid is good. So I'm going to warm my oven up. I'm not going to just jump in. I'm going to have ginger tea or cinnamon tea or something to warm up my digestion before I have that piece of meat. I'm going to take vitamin C. So I'm going to have some orange juice. I'm going to take digestive enzymes to help me break that meat down so I can absorb that iron well and help my body build. And then the other thing, like I mentioned to you, is we need to stop the bleeding. we talked about in the beginning, the reason for the bleeding is the high estrogen. So this links right back to your first question. So the first part of the question was saying that high estrogen is the reason the progesterone doesn't kick in. And high estrogen is also the reason why there's heavy bleeding. So if we manage the estrogen well, then yes, we will get the period down to 3 days and we will get moderate bleeding and we will be able to build the blood faster than is being lost.
Lovely.
Yeah. So
So,
that's
Doc,
where I would
just
go with
talk
that.
briefly on how to manage estrogen, just briefly, on some strategies. We could probably bring
Okay.
the detox in as well. Mhm.
So the one we mentioned today, which is I think the easiest one for everybody to follow, if you have really bad estrogen dominance, then I would say 7 days before your cycle. If it's not bad, 3 days before your cycle. Okay. And all you're doing is you're increasing your fiber and making sure you poop. So what I recommend, grated carrots every single day. So from day so you're checking, let's check backwards. So day -7, because the period is day 1, right? So day -7, all the way up to day 1, you're gonna just grate a carrot with the skin on and eat it. They found that to be the fastest, easiest way because it works on the liver with the vitamin A. That's one aspect. And it adds fiber, which also helps with the second aspect to bind that estrogen in the gut itself so that you're not reabsorbing it. So you add the fiber, and then I like to do something that's going to make you poop. Now, for some people, they may not need to add something to make them poop. So they may just be say, well, doc, I go to the toilet every single day, but I don't want it to just go. I want a good flush because I want it out. So I would say take something. So like I said, we use the drink to shrink. Coach Jason has his detox pills, which work as well. I've done the same 7-day protocol with your colon cleanse. That works well too. So anything that's going to just make you poop a little more than usual. So your carrots for your fiber and your liver support, something to make you poop 7 days before or 5 days before your period. That really shuts that excess estrogen cycle down, and you'll start to notice that your period is much better from the first month that you do it. Okay. For women that have a lot of clots, they have a different element because the clots are related to calcium. So calcium is meant to prevent the blood from clotting. So what happens is when your period is about to start, your body pulls a lot of calcium from the body to send to the uterus so that that uterus blood flows and doesn't clot. That's why a lot of women will find their teeth hurt before their period. They get joint pains before their period, their belly, and they get cramps and lower back pains because you're pulling calcium. And if you're already deficient in calcium, that's why you start to get lots of clots. So if you have heavy periods and clots, you do the detox and you add a calcium supplement. And usually that, I don't think I've had anybody not have results just doing those two things. That detox protocol and adding a calcium supplement on those 7 days prior to the period. That combination covers pretty much everybody who's going to have heavy flow. Now, the first month you may see, okay, right, my period is still 7 days, but I didn't get as many clots or I didn't have as many cramps. And then the next cycle you do it, you find, oh, wait, I'm down to 6 days. And then the next cycle you might see, okay, I'm down to 6 days, but no clots. And then, so as you keep doing that, eventually each cycle will see until you get to the point. So I will tell you for myself, I think it took me about 4 or 5 cycles to get down to 3 days because I was about 6, 7 days. And I would say about 4 or 5 cycles, I was down to 3 days, maybe 3.5 days, depending on the timing. And it stayed that way. And I still do my protocol, but because I'm good, I will do my protocol 3 days before. So I have a thing set. And if it's one time I take my stuff, I've taken it for those 3 days before. And that has been, a real game changer. So that's what I would suggest you start. Now, if you're doing that and you see that you're still having issues, then of course, see a doctor, have an ultrasound done because there are other things that could be part of that. We have endometrial cancer, you could have endometrial polyps, you could have things wrong with the cervix, and those can contribute as well to the bleeding that is not related to the estrogen level. Okay, so start with that protocol.
Okay, Doc, from the same person, how do we do that when the periods are irregular? I'm just in the want to know how they go start the 7 days if they have irregular periods.
So you start the cycle and you set it based on what your cycle used to be. So if you used to have a 28-day cycle, you map out your 28-day cycle from whenever. So it's 28 days that you had before you started having irregular periods. You have a period now, so you start today as day 1 and you map it as 28 days, right? Even if it's irregular, when you reach day 29, that should have been your day 1. Whether you see a cycle or bleeding or not, you take your detox.
Okay.
So it's almost as we force in a retrain. Yeah.
Okay.
And eventually the retraining will catch up, because what we're doing is we're forcing a drop in the estrogen, regardless of what's happening.
All
Does that make
right.
sense?
So I have a next one related to that bleeding. And guys, keep your questions coming. Now, this client, they would have had, like, let me say, normal 3 to 5 day periods, but after using the copper IUD, they're now up to 7 to 10. What could cause that, and how can it be reversed?
Lovely question. So copper IUDs, most IUDs, so there are 2 types of IUDs. Some are drug containing, so they release hormones, and some don't, right? So I'm not sure which one they have, but it doesn't really matter. But here's the
The
thing.
copper,
Here's the thing.
not the hormone one.
Here's the thing. Heavy bleeding, menstrual blood, is a form of detox. Let me put it like that. When the body is, or the uterus is inflamed, and women have this story, and you could ask women where they would have a STD or a bad pelvic inflammatory disease or something like that, and they get irregular bleeding. The bleeding that they see is because of inflammation, right? When you have a copper or any foreign object inside there, you cause inflammation in the uterus itself, okay? And because you've caused inflammation in the uterus is trying to flush itself out. So you'll see women who have untreated STDs and all these other things, they tend to have excessive and heavy periods because there's a lot of inflammation there. Remember, I was talking last week where you could have toxins from the rectum, because remember, the rectum touches the wall of the uterus to the back. So you could have translocation of bacteria, viruses, toxins straight from the colon, straight into the uterus. And how is the uterus going to get rid of this? Because the colon, I'm going to poop it out. The bladder, I'm going to pee it out. So how is the uterus going to get rid of toxins and anything that's building up there that's not supposed to be there? It's going to bleed. So because it's bleeding, it's trying to get rid of inflammation, right? So you could probably see, if you see a picture with the other section of the uterus. So cut across longitudinally, so you can see the bladder, the uterus, and the rectum.
Okay. Sure, go for it.
That will give them a better idea of what I just spoke about, because that translocation oftentimes is inflammation as well. So always remember that menstrual blood is also a form of detox. So some women might do a detox protocol and they find they suddenly bleed for 2 weeks. And they'd be like, oh my God, I was good all the time. And then I did this detox and I started to bleed. And it's because the uterus is seeing the opportunity to release a lot of the toxins and the chemicals and the inflammation. And it's doing that through the menstrual blood. And that causes the heavy bleeding. Yeah, perfect. So we see that perfectly there. So you see the bladder is literally touching the uterus. The rectum is touching the uterus as well. So oftentimes I see women come in and they complain about frequent bladder infections. They always have this bladder infection. And oftentimes it's related to what's happening in the uterus and in the colon, because the bacteria can literally, remember this is microscopic, inflamed tissue is stretched. Inflamed tissue has open junctions. So the bacteria can go through those junctions and things from the rectum get to the bladder. So I'll have people come in and they'll say they have E. coli in the urine. E. coli comes from stool. How did it get there? Okay, maybe you're white badly, but oftentimes it literally goes through all the layers and gets to the other side. Yeah. So heavy bleeding could be also a sign that you need to detox, and maybe the copper is too strong for you. Your body doesn't like that. And therefore, for you, it creates an extra detox that has to happen, that added on those couple extra days.
Okay, got you. All right, let me ask the next question here. Okay, somebody asked us, we'll cover this. Is there a way to shrink fibroids naturally? We have fibroid webinar coming up, so maybe we could jump back on and cover that in that one. All
Well, we
right.
talked about
All
quite a
right.
few things. So the estrogen is a big one there. So we did cover that a bit.
Okay. So by controlling estrogen levels to normal will
Correct.
also
Will help
stop
shrink the
feeding the fuel
fibroid.
for the
Yeah.
fibroids.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, let me see here. Why do some women have lower abdominal pain like 24 to 48 hours after their period?
Exactly what I spoke about just now. Calcium being low. Remember, calcium and magnesium work by contracting and relaxing the muscle in sync. Your period
Mhm.
actually happens because the uterus is contracting. Okay. So oftentimes the pain and the cramps is because it doesn't have enough calcium to run another contraction relaxation cycle. Some women will also feel it like heaviness, like your bladder just feels heavy and they have to hold, that lower abdomen area and they're like, oh, it's just achy, it just feels heavy, low calcium. So majority of the time it's calcium deficiency that does that.
Okay, sweet. Now, I'm not sure if this one is related to the topic, but let me just ask it still. Should you do the same thing if you have hypo or hyperthyroidism? The same thing being the detox prior to your period, then calcium and carbs prior to the periods?
Um, so the thyroid is a master gland and it kind of controls estrogen production to some extent. The issue with estrogen production is that you have other sources. So it's not as clean as thyroid is the only one that affects it. However, I see a lot of menopausal women that end up with thyroid issues because their thyroid is working overtime to try to manage the ovary going out of balance. So it's like when you go into menopause and your estrogen drops, the thyroid is like, estrogen, wake up. So ovaries, wake up. Why are you not making estrogen? Wake up, wake up, wake up. And the thyroid tries to fill the gap with some thyroid hormones to fill the gap where the estrogen is lacking. And therefore, the menopausal women are the number one group for thyroid issues. So if you look at thyroid issues, whether it's hypo, whatever kind of thyroid dysfunction, it's who is menopausal women. Premenopausal and menopausal women make up, I would say, 90% of the thyroid cases that we see. So oftentimes, yes, the thyroid and the ovaries are linked. And if you have estrogen issues, it will affect your thyroid. And if you leave it untreated, it will affect the thyroid. So it's a little bit more than just saying, yes, do your detox. But yes, doing a detox will help because if you do manage your estrogen, the thyroid will settle and not feel like it needs to produce all these hormones to kind of control the ovaries anymore. Right. But thyroid is a little more complex than that because it does a lot more for your basic metabolic rate. So it goes back to what we were
Mm,
saying about the oven, because if your thyroid is not working well, that's part of your pilot lights. Yeah. So somebody with thyroid
right.
issues and again, bloating, digestive problems, and all these kinds of things, you're not digesting well. Your pilot light is off, your basic metabolic rate is gone. And that's why, you're having all this spillover symptoms in other body organs because the thyroid is controlling that basic metabolic rate for everybody. And that's being turned off because a chronic starvation, maybe you're on a diet, you're not eating enough. So your body is conserving the thyroid sort of down regulates the metabolism bit by bit till the point where you starve the organs and the organs don't know what to do.
Perfect. So I have a next question here for you. Okay, this is interesting. What causes a woman to have two menstrual cycle a month for 3 months in a row?
Good. We spoke about that. And the two reasons really estrogen issues. So if you have a
Mm,
chronically high estrogen, that graph that we showed, remember you're looking at the spike to stop that flow. You're looking at that raise. And if you have a chronically high, you never get that signal to turn off, right? And that could be part of the reason that you have more than one cycle. It's almost as if you shorten this cycle should be, yeah. So this cycle should be 28 days. Imagine if I cram this cycle into 12 days because the peak not happening.
I
So it's
see.
like you have two cycles in 1 month because you never have that dip and peak that you're supposed to have. The other thing I would suggest is probably detoxing as well too, because again, menstrual blood is a form of detox. So if you have lots of toxins, if you're constipated, if you have any sort of infection anywhere, that will also contribute to you having more than one cycle in a month. If you have PMOS, remember these cysts can also control the cycle as well, because these cysts can also make estrogen. So your uterus has an intrinsic cycle and it knows when to bleed, but the uterus is also influenced by the ovaries, the thyroid, and other organs. So sometimes you have the uterus doing one cycle and then you have your ovaries doing another cycle. So the uterus confused. And if the lining is thick enough to support a second period, then you will have a second period, right? But it still goes back to managing the estrogen levels and looking at the detox. Do you need to detox? And one of the ways I'd say you need to detox, look at the blood that's coming out. If that blood is brown, black, strange smells, it's thick, 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 that is usually a sign that it's all stagnant blood that the uterus is trying to flush. Menstrual blood, remember, is blood that really should help a whole baby develop. So it should be bright red, oxygenated, good, healthy blood, full of stem cells. Okay. So if it's old and it's smelly and it's dark, it's probably a detox reaction. So look at the type of blood that you see coming out as well. That gives you a little bit of answer. I also talk about warmth being a big part of that because women tend to have pelvic stagnancy. So pelvic congestion syndrome is where as a woman gets pregnant, 25% of her blood could literally sit around the uterus. Okay. So 25%, that's a quarter of your blood volume, could just stay there in your pelvis, not moving, just circulating around the uterus. And that creates stagnancy. And one of the things that modulates that is estrogen. So again, women with estrogen dominance tend to have a lot of stagnancy in the pelvic system. And that also creates the potential for extra bleeding. So a lot of the times I'll say put some warmth, keep the lower abdomen pelvis warm. So a warm towel or a heating pad to the front, to the back, to help that blood circulate better. Because if you improve the circulation, those issues with the estrogen stagnancy, the blood flow stagnancy, that should also settle down as part of that as well too.
Okay, sweet. So, Doc, I think you should just touch briefly on what type of detoxes women should do, one. And then on the same topic of estrogen, this is my question. Would things like DIM, the supplement DIM, help with that?
Yes, it does. There are lots of supplements that help. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see if I have a list.
Take your time. Take your time. I'm pressing you for time tonight. I see the ladies still engaged. Now, ladies, if you guys have to run off, those of you who have to run off, feel free to. And if you got the questions answered. But I see all the ladies still engaged, so I'm not running nobody off tonight. You take as long as you want. When I say as long, we're going until midnight. But we're getting the information done. And
So
while
let me
Dr.
give
Dean
you
is putting the
some.
information up, oh,
Let
go
me
ahead,
give you
Doc.
some good ones.
Guys,
Black
take
cohosh.
notes.
So black cohosh, dong quai, dim, are good ones for helping, and evening primrose is also great for helping balance anybody who has any sort of hormonal dysregulation. So be it estrogen, progesterone balance not being as good as it should be. Those would be the big ones that I would suggest. Dong quai is the only questionable one because there was some studies that came out talking about dong quai and fibroids. Nothing significant. So I just say use with caution or use in a formula with other components that help in with fibroids, right? Vitamin B's absolutely essential. Magnesium, absolutely essential. Calcium, absolutely essential. So all women should be on a calcium magnesium supplement, especially that time period before your period and during your period. So that's what I do. I rotate because you can't take everything every day. I have like a pharmacy in my house. Like if you see how much supplements and pills I have, you'll call me a junkie. But I don't take everything every day. So a lot of the things I cycle through. So calcium and magnesium for me, I'll probably take a combination tablet that week, a couple days before the period into the period. And again, that's to relieve cramps, that's to relieve clotting, and that's to help so I don't get any pains or cramps, belly pains, cramps, lower back pain, or any of those symptoms. So that's essential. B vitamins, particularly B6, is really important for liver and liver metabolizing hormones. So a good B vitamin is also really, really critical during your period when it starts. And some sort of liver support. So liver support could look like as simple as dandelion roots. You could go more fancy and use one of the products like Nutrisec or um, Live 52. I don't know if you all have Live 52 there, but it's a herbal liver formula, um, milk thistle extract, um, Eclipta I've found to be helpful with that as well too. So anything that supports liver function will also be really helpful, in that perspective. I tell people start simple. I would maybe one of these times we could probably build a product list that we could share because there are quite a few nice combination products out there that we can use. But I tell people I like to start simple and work your way up. So just hit everything. A good B vitamin, get a good calcium magnesium supplement, choose one of the herbal formulas that we said. So like I say, the black cohosh or the dim, whichever one you want. Inositol has also gotten something. There's a mayo something formula with inositol and something else. That's also quite good because you get in the bees and, So, and then one liver product and make it simple. So for me, like, I love tea. I'm a tea drinker, right? So it's easy for me to add dandelion tea to my day-to-day routine. And sometimes I'll even use dandelion tea and more tea. So let's say I feel like drinking an Earl Grey, and I throw my dandelion tea bag in that too, and I drink it. So that's easy for me to add on. So it doesn't feel like I'm taking another pill. Sometimes I'd use magnesium oil. So days that, okay, it's leading up, I don't feel like taking a magnesium tablet. I'm going to just rub down my legs or do a foot soak with some Epsom salts. And that way I'm going to up my magnesium prior to my period. So not every day I have to take a pill necessarily. But if you start to build those lifestyle habits that can add those elements in, it becomes easier, right? So don't look at everything that I need a pill for this, I need a pill for that, I need a pill for the other. It really helps if you just understand. And that's why a lot of what I focus on is understanding the concepts. Because if you understand the concepts, this is where I am. So this is what will build the best layer for me. So if we use the example of the person talking about having 2 cycles for the month, right? And let's suppose that person has PCOS, right? And let's suppose that person is overweight, right? So then we're thinking, okay, what is the priority here? The priority for her is going to be getting that bleeding, that excess bleeding to slow down, getting some sort of detox, and then some sort of liver support, gut support, because she needs to get the nutrition back in her system. Because bleeding that often is going to mean that you're nutritionally depleted. So before she starts anything else, the first thing she needs to look at is her diet. Is she eating well, or is she chronically starving herself? What is the temperature of her diet like? Is she eating a lot of cold foods? Cold foods is going to cause stagnancy. Cold foods, you're not absorbing your nutrition. You're bloated, poor gut health. So a simple routine. Every morning is a cup of tea with some ginger in it, maybe porridge like oatmeal, something warm for breakfast, a rice porridge, oatmeal porridge, barley porridge, something that's warm first thing in the morning. And then she has some sort of iron-rich meal around 10 o'clock or so. And that could be as simple as, just some cooked spinach. It could be a greens pack. It could be anything to add that extra iron and vitamin C around midday. And that's a good place to start, right? Now, to layer on that now, she could look at, okay, so I'm bleeding. I've done my nutrition to add the iron, add my digestion, add my supplements. How am I going to detox? So the detox could take the form of doing saunas. Saunas are great for circulation, great for sweating, great for rebalancing those excess hormones. And she could do a sauna with a foot soak. Yeah. So let's say twice a week, 3 times a week, a sauna and a foot soak. So now we're building another layer onto that. And then she says, okay, how am I going to support my liver? I'm going to support my liver by doing dandelion tea every night. Or maybe a dandelion ashwagandha mix, because ashwagandha is really good for just calming down and letting that progesterone get some time to kick in. So dandelion, ashwagandha mix might be good. Maybe she could do some tulsi. I don't know if you all know holy basil tulsi, similar to ashwagandha, very calming. Maca is stimulating, guys. So you don't want to do maca when we already think we have too much, right? Maca is the, we want to bring it down because she's over bleeding. She's having all this thing happen. So we want to tone it down. So she wants things that's going to calm everything down. So you want calming things. So the ashwagandha, tulsi leaf is good for that as well too. That would be good for her to settle in and, like I said, build her detox from there. And that way it's not a set of pills, no, it's a combination of lifestyle things that become easy. And then as she gets better, she builds on it even more. So, okay, great. Now by month 2, month 3, she's down to having 1 period a month, but the period is still heavy. So then her next phase, okay, now the period's just heavy. It's not happening too often. So now I need to control the amount of bleeding. So now the focus is going to be the detox, because now it's about getting the estrogen down. So our focus needs to be what we talked about, the estrogen foods to get rid of, getting rid of the plastic bottles, staying away from the grains and all these things until that period settles. And let's say she goes now from having periods of 6 days. So now she's manageable. So now she's having a 5-day period. We're on months, let's say 4, month 5, right? What's the next step? Working on digestion, working on the healing, working on getting rid of her PCOS now. So because we've calmed everything down, right? Of course, the easiest cure for PCOS is to get pregnant because that resets everything. But let's suppose she doesn't want to get pregnant. Yeah, pregnancy is the reset button for everything female related. You don't know what to do? Get pregnant. And everything's everything settles down. So let's say she doesn't want to get pregnant. So she's now focusing on, again, optimizing her health. So now she can add the fancier products, right? So now she's focusing on diet. She's doing a heavier detox. So before, her detox was just before the period alone. Maybe now she wants to do a full 1 month detox. Now she wants to start an exercise program. So now she adds another layer, and maybe she stops some of the other things because now she's gotten that sort of break from having that. So now she's in that phase, in that layer, to shorten the cycle period, shorten the bleeding, get her blood count up, start to feel better, move a little bit more. And then maybe 2 or 3 cycles after that, that has also settled down. And she looks and she does an ultrasound. She has small cysts, but it's much better than where she is. So at that point now, it's just to keep going. So now she might make another change to her diet. So she said, okay, I need more warming things. Maybe I need to cut out the chicken completely now rather than spacing it out. Maybe I need to be more aggressive with movement and stretching and toning. Maybe I need to do more saunas because the saunas were really helpful for my circulation and varicose veins. So now let me focus on doing that as part of this detox. And then you keep going and building from there, So it's not a one size fits all. I tell people, look at your symptoms and prioritize what is most important to you. If your fatigue from the heavy periods is your biggest symptom, that's what stops you from getting up in the morning and doing what you need to do, then that should be your first focus. Only diet, getting your iron count up. So take your digestive enzymes, map out your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Make sure you're hitting all your iron supplements. Do what you need to do to get you that sorted first, and then move on to the next step, right? It's not going to, and let me just put it out there. A lot of women have this fear. Now, I am not one to tell people, go have surgery if it's unnecessary. But there are a lot of women who are at the point where, what nonsense you're telling me about trying to do it naturally. Because at some point in life, it's going to get too big to be in your control, to control it naturally. So if you have a 12 centimeter fibroid, a 15 centimeter fibroid, don't tell me about anything natural. You left that train behind long time. Okay? Go have surgery done. You have surgery, you take it out, all of a sudden you feel like a bra. I've seen it. Women go and they have their surgery done, they take out the fibroid, and they like, their skin start to glow. They feel better. They have more energy because this thing was sucking them dry, right? So be realistic. Somebody who has a 4 centimeter fibroid, 5 centimeter fibroid, yeah, by all means, go natural. Do what you need to do, get that to shrink. Do, anything above 6, 7, 8 centimeters, we kind of in that gray area. And listen, anything 10 centimeters, surgery. I'm not even going to play around or try to do it naturally, because you're at a point where to shrink that fibroid, it's a toxic load, because remember, your body has to break down all this matter and reabsorb it and convert it to a form that could be excreted, right? Because it's abnormal tissue. That takes a lot. So a fibroid is that big for the body to break down. It's going to cavitate, create more bleeding, and now create a perfect environment for toxins to settle, for bacteria to create an infection, because it's blood and tissue, dead, decaying blood and tissue in this fibroid that's shrinking. Okay, and so if you have a large fibroid that size, you don't want to do natural, because as it's sort of degenerating, you're just creating more problems. Now, in a small fibroid that's 3 centimeters, 4 centimeters, as that fibroid starts to decay, because it's so small, it's easy to confine that, eliminate that, and move on with life, right? So be realistic about your goals and your challenges in terms of doing that. You didn't do it for the last 5 years. So really go and spend the next 5 years to shrink the fibroid naturally? No, you're not going to. So if it's large, just be realistic. It's not going to help. Don't bother. Go have your surgery done, take it out, and spend the time and the effort maintaining. Because just having the fibroid out doesn't mean you're going to maintain good health. It doesn't mean the fibroids can't come back. So the same thing follows. You still have to create an environment that's healthy in the pelvis, healthy in the uterus, that fibroids don't come back.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So I have one more question here for you. I hope I ain't cutting into your night sleep and not cutting into it, but oh
You don't
gosh.
like to sleep, right? It's
I
not
know
10 o'clock
you're
yet,
going to
so you're
sleep
good.
early. Okay, last one for the night. Is it normal for a woman of childbearing age to continue having normal estrogen levels for years after undergoing, I don't know what this means, THBSO?
Yes. Okay, no, let me rephrase that. So we're saying normal, but remember, I started this with saying normal is different for everybody.
Right.
So what she's talking about is having a hysterectomy. So if you have a
Oh,
hysterectomy, typically you've taken out the end organ of estrogen. So oftentimes the ovaries stop making estrogen and your estrogen levels plummet. But remember, normal is different for everybody. So somebody who maybe has a higher level of estrogen as their baseline and it drops, they may find the drop isn't so significant that it takes them into menopause immediately. Remember also, I spoke about there are other organs that can produce estrogen. So remember, fat cells can make estrogen. So if that person has imbalance where their fat cells are making a lot of estrogen, let's say they're overweight, then you could find that their levels don't drop the way that it's supposed to drop, because that's controlling that. So is it a problem? Only if the person is having symptoms. So I would suggest, if that person has a hysterectomy, their estrogen levels are normal and they feel normal, praise the Lord. They are lucky and they should count their blessings that they're not going into menopause early. If they're having symptoms then of estrogen dominance, and that's a whole different scenario. And then they should work on their detox, because again, we talked about it earlier, the recycling of estrogen could be what's happening there. And because they're recycling their low estrogen, is coming up as normal on a blood test, because the blood test doesn't tell me where the estrogen came from. The blood just tells me this is what your value is today. And if you're checking it at different points in your cycle, you get different values. And you're comparing it to a ratio, again, mostly Caucasian women. So sometimes you find as Black women, which is why they postulate we're more prone to fibroids, we could be on the higher end in terms of estrogen levels as our baseline. And that's why one of the reasons we are more prone to having fibroids. And fibroids grow really huge and really rapidly. When you look at Asian women, for instance, they tend to have lower estrogen levels generally than us, and the rate that of them having fibroids is also way lower. They don't get huge, massive fibroids like you see in the Black population. So again, one of the reasons why, but maybe not the only one, but it could definitely contribute.
Okay, sweet, sweet. All right. I've okay. I think I should let you go sleep. You have one more question. You want
Yes,
this?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, this is gonna be last, and we're gonna let Doc get some sleep tonight. Right. What advice do you have for my friend with adenomyosis and endometriosis?
Adenomyosis, I think, right?
Oh, adenomyosis. Okay.
Yeah. So adenomyosis, if you could you Google that and put up a picture? Just put
Sure.
in
Sure. No
adenomyosis,
problem.
and because
Sure.
that one is it's a bit,
Tricky.
yeah, it'll be better
Let
to,
me
it's
go.
easier to explain on a diagram. Just put in adenomyosis and you'll see like a diagram that has like three different uteri in a picture.
All
It should
right,
be
I
one of the
see.
first things that pop up. Let me see if I can,
All right,
see
let
if
me
I can.
see here. Let me share my screen so we could see here, right? Right. I think this is it. Let me just share my screen so you could tell me which one, and then I'll pull it up for you.
Okay, let me see.
Right. Share screen. This is what comes.
Click images,
Click on
yeah.
images.
Oh, this one in the corner there. You see that one with the four?
This?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. I like a video though, but okay. Let me just zoom into it.
Yeah, you could just, oh, right, that's perfect. So it's just zoom in, that's
Right.
perfect. So the first, what adenomyosis is essentially is that blood lining that creates the blood lining. So this the line of cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those cells generate the blood lining, and for some reason, we're still not sure why, those cells migrate into the muscle itself. So you'll see in picture two, stages one and two, you see these little things that look like cysts.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if they're creating like mini uteri within the muscle. Because
Mm-hmm.
what literally happens is they're secreting the secretions that should have been put into the uterus into the muscle itself. So what tends to happen with those women is that every time that uterus contracts, they get severe pain because it's like you've weakened the muscle because there are all these cysts within the muscle itself, and these cysts are generating blood, which is like irritating to the muscle itself. So it can be focal, where you're just seeing one cyst or two cysts, or it could be diffuse, where the whole muscle just on the ultrasound looks spotty, spotty, spotty. That's when it's really, really bad. And it becomes a problem because the uterus becomes so weak, even maintaining a pregnancy is difficult. Now, one of my theories on this is the same like I have with fibroids, where there must be some kind of trauma to cause a cell to migrate completely into the muscle when it's a cell that's supposed to be lining the inside. Why would it go into the muscle and create its own little ecosystem inside there? So I think it always has to do with some sort of trauma. And I keep saying there's chemical trauma, there's physical trauma. Infections may be a part of that because not all infections are STD, guys. Yes? Not all infections are STDs. You could just have E. coli or bacteria that exists in our body that for some reason causes pelvic inflammatory disease. You weaken the muscle, there's trauma, and that muscle goes in. So it's a weakening of this. So I have found raspberry leaf tea to be quite helpful in this. I found extra calcium, magnesium to be helpful for this. And watching the protein because the muscle needs to heal. So balancing that stimulation by the estrogen as well as muscle repair tends to be the mechanism. Because if you go to the gynaes, they don't do anything. They'll just say, oh, it's endometriosis. Let's repeat our ultrasound in 6 months. Because very little is known about why it happens in the first place. But like I said, based on my experience and what I've seen the people, because it can disappear. I've had people who had endometriosis and it disappeared. So I always think about it from the perspective of what would cause that type of trauma and what is the tissue that we're looking at. It is a muscle. Your uterus is a muscle. Muscles are built of protein. Okay,
Protein.
so a weak muscle could have this sort of problem. And what will make a muscle weak?
Lack of use.
Lack of
Lack of
use,
protein.
yeah, lack of protein, lack of blood supply.
Mm.
Yeah. So if it's not oxygenating well, so there's poor circulation to the muscle. If the nerve instructing the muscle isn't working, if the protein content and stuff isn't well, all of this is going to affect the strength of the muscle and create this type of picture. So I look at it from that perspective. Look at what's going to strengthen the muscle and how that muscle gets strengthened. And because we're talking about the uterus, it goes back to what we were talking about with estrogen, pelvic stagnancy. If you're not getting oxygenated blood to the uterus, you're going to have this sort of issue. So how do we get oxygen to the uterus? Again, fixing your low blood count. If your blood count is low, you got to get it up. Exercise and warmth. Keeping the pelvis nice and warm encourages the circulation. So even just massaging the belly, putting a heating pad on the belly in the night, avoiding cold drinks, because everybody's had that experience where you drink something icy cold, you literally feel it drop into your stomach and then your whole belly literally feels cold to touch. All those things for women is quite dangerous. So like you'll see me, it will be 35 degrees outside and you'll see me drinking hot tea, right? Because I've seen that in myself where that cold just sits there after I have something that's really icy. So encouraging the warmth, the circulation, watching the protein content would be how I would manage this person. And like I said, red raspberry leaf tea are found to be helpful with this. And I always add a calcium magnesium to this as well, again, to help with that contraction relaxation to get that muscle. If there is an element of PMOS, then of course I would also think about how are we managing the estrogen levels. So then we'll do the detox we talked about. Then we will do like the fiber and all these things to keep the estrogen levels down. That's if it's happening with a PMOS. If it's happening on its own, that's all I'm going to do. Red raspberry leaf tea actually originally was used post-pregnancy to help the uterus return to its normal size, right? But what they found is also helpful with a lot of other things. So that's why this is my main focus when I do, like I see adenomyosis. You want something that's going to strengthen the uterus, and red raspberry leaf tea is one of those things. I love it. It's fantastic. I think that really helps. I remember that working so well. I remember having a patient, a little girl come in, and she's having such period cramps. And literally, because I always have it in my office, I made her a cup of tea. And I told the mother, give her that tea while I see this patient, and then I'll see her after. By the time she got into me, because she was about 13 or 14, by the time she got to me, she was laughing, talking, zero pain. It worked that quickly for her in terms of relaxing the muscle. So it's quite good for this type of picture. Because this, I think, and again, my disclaimer from my experience, because gynaes don't know what to do about it, I think it's weak muscles, which is circulation, protein. Makes sense, right?
Perfect,
At least
perfect.
to me,
Yes, it
it's
makes sense with
logical,
the
right?
circulation.
Yeah, it's logical. So
Yeah,
if it's weak, there must be a reason why it's weak. It's a muscle. So it must
right.
behave like a muscle. So what do muscles need? How do they behave? And work backwards from there.
Mhm. Well said, well said. Well, one thing that stood out for me was the trauma with the fibroids. Like something always cause
Mm-hmm.
inflammation as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just saying
Mm-hmm.
estrogen or this or that. That
Mm-hmm.
definitely will change the way I look at this when I have clients with them. So thank you for sharing that with me. Right. Now, that being said, I know we pass time, past bedtime. Every time that should be passed, we passed already. But nonetheless, the ladies enjoy it because all of them still here. So let me just thank you, Dr. Dionne, again for sparing 2 hours plus to come on here and exchange your knowledge with us and helping these ladies who made it time to come on this webinar. Thank you on behalf of the Evesham Sda Church. I know this is not going to be the last time. I know we still have plenty more to do. If you ladies would just give Dr. Dionne some love in the chats, drop your heart emoji, show your thanks so that she can feel love. So she will come back. If she can feel love, she can come back now. Make sure make sure and have her feeling love so she will come back. And I think I know I have a webinar to do on fibroids. I think that might be a good follow-up to this because I saw some questions, a couple of questions came with fibroids. So I think I will put that in the sequence of webinars to do. But Dr. Dionne, thanks again. Any closing statements?
I hope this was helpful. Um, I think as women, we struggle a lot with some of these things. And what I do hope is we have the time so that people can actually come and feel open enough to speak about their challenges and speak about their experiences with fibroids and what they're struggling to with or struggling through because I think it's only when we share we grow. And we have this shame and guilt associated with these things like fibroids and PCOS. And I really feel it shouldn't be that way. We should, like you said, be showing love to each other. And I think people should be open about saying, hey, I had to have surgery. This was my experience. I struggled with this. I tried to do it natural and I failed. That's okay because that's how we learn. And what I really hope is that everybody feels more confident about coming up and sharing their experiences. And maybe next time we could have an open floor about it that people can talk. And maybe through their experience and what they share, we could all learn because there's no guilt, there's no shame. People think, how did I let myself get here? How did I let myself get so sick? And that guilt and shame is what holds them back from true healing because the healing has to happen mental, spiritual, physical level. And only when you release that burden of, this happened to me, you know, we can really get to the point where as women, we can share, we can build each other up. And I really just hope somebody got some information that they didn't have that can help them at least make one positive change with all of that, one positive change in their life, from tonight going forward. One thing. I just hope that because that makes it worth it for me. And I like my sleep. That makes it worth it. I don't mind missing my sleep. I need my little, 8 hours, but I don't mind missing that if it changed somebody's life. I'm happy with that.
Well said, Doc. Well said, well said. And thank you again so much. And I see all the love coming in the chat. So definitely the ladies concur with that emotion as well. They really appreciate the information. A lot of persons saying thank you, lovely presentation. And what we'll do, we'll make this available. Well, it's available on the Evesham Sda YouTube channel now. Once we finish it, it will be available there. So you guys can go and watch it back there. And I'll try and see if I could upload it on the Fitma as well. So if it goes off you over there, you could have access to it there. So that being said, let us bring the curtains down on this wonderful session that we would hope never ended, but it has to end like everything else. So just bow your heads with me as I pray. Dear Father in heaven, I want to thank you so much, Lord, for imbuing Doc with this wonderful knowledge, experience that she could come and share. We ask, Lord, that you may continue to bless and expand her territory and her ministry so that as she go out and help women all around the world, they may be impacted positively and experience good health. I want to thank you again for this platform. I want to thank you for all of the ladies and men who showed up tonight and the information that was disseminated to them. We ask, Lord, that they may be retained, more importantly, practice, and as Doc said, at least one thing, use one thing, start from there, and continue building. Thank you again, Lord, for this platform. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, everyone, have yourselves a great night. You could tell Doc goodbye. You could unmute yourself and say good night, Doc. You feel free to do that as we leave the webinar.
Good night, Doc. Thank you again so much for all the information. Have a blessed night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, Doc. Good night.
Good night, Doc. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night.
All right, guys, y'all take care. Have a great night. Doc, sleep well. You have a few more minutes before 10 o'clock, so start winding down.
I'll make it work. I'll make it work.
All right, all right. Take care. Let me end this thing so you can make it 10 o'clock deadline. All the best.
Take care. Good night.
All right, bye-bye. I should be back in Trinidad end of this week. So we'll link up.